the option right now as I'm recording. If you want to opt out of this meeting, if you're not comfortable being recorded, feel free to take that option, but we are live and recording right now. So welcome to well, we're off to a great start. Bay Area Agile Coaching Circles. I'm Susan and I'm one of the organizers of our group. And we are a group that is focused on agile coaching topics. I'll pull up what our meetup looks like. So around each month, we have a different topic or speaker, or we come together and just share our experiences in agile coaching. We are always looking for organizers or speakers or anyone to help out with this meetup. So if you're interested, you can go here and just message all of the organizers in one fell swoop by doing that. So that is a little bit about us and our group. And you are here tonight to see Fred. And because it is Halloween season, this is kind of an agile nightmare themed event tonight. As I'm introducing Fred, what I'd love to hear from you in chat is, what is your Halloween costume this year? Or if you don't dress up, what would it be if you were to dress up? So I was going as Kevin from Up. Kevin is the bird from Up, and my boyfriend went as Russell, who is the Boy Scout from Up. So we went to the Disney Halloween event in that costume. But feel free to share in chat, what's your costume this year? And if you're not dressing up, what would you dress up as? So speaking of Halloween, spooky season, and nightmares, we are here to hear from Fred tonight. So Fred is a former mayor of Sunnyvale, California. I used to live there actually for a year, so that's pretty cool. Great city. Fred has his PSM-3 as well as a doctorate in Scrum and has written many books. Most recently, one called is Case Studies in Agile. Actually, let me make sure that I got this one. Advanced Scrum Case Studies, which is available on Fred's website. And what I'm doing right now is linking to that in chat. And Fred, I noticed you're also offering a course on the Introduction to Scrum Framework starting next week. That is pretty exciting. What did I miss from your intro that you want people to know about you?
Well, let's see. Actually, I've written 3 books now. The first one I published in 2019, and it's called Navigating Hybrid Scrum Environments. The second book was Advanced Scrum Case Studies, which really came out of a meetup that's similar to this one. I do a meetup every 2 weeks where we talk about situations that have to do with Agile and Scrum, and we get together and analyze them vis-a-vis the Scrum Framework, figure out what's going on, and then figure out what steps we would take to deal with them. And I am now once again teaching this Scrum class for PSM1 people, basically beginners. And I used to do that a long time ago. I taught them live, but now I'm teaching them online as an experiment. I'm actually wrapping up the first class tomorrow. It's been going on since last week at 2 p.m. on various days. The next class is going to be at 6 p.m. because I did a survey to find out what time of day people preferred, and the overwhelming preference was 6 p.m. So next Monday, I'm starting a new session of this class. It'll be Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 6 p.m. for 2 weeks. And if you enroll in the class, you'll get a free copy of my book, An Introduction to the Scrum Framework, which is the number 3 book I've written. And it's $49.95, a very cheap price. But if you're a member of my meetup, you get a promo code that gives you 30% discount. So, and by the way, enrollment for the next class closes on Saturday. So if you're interested, please go to my website, which is www.siliconvalleyscrum.com, and sign up. And what else to find out about me. Yeah, I was a politician a long time ago. I've gone through my 12-step program and recovered. And I lived in China for a couple of years. I want to go back. And I'm an oil painter. I'm an artist, in addition to all that stuff. So I don't know what else to say about me, except that Olaf and I go back a long time. But Vicky and Michael and Deanna and Season, you're all new to me. So I'm very pleased to meet you all.
I'm excited to meet you as well.
Okay. Oh, and one quick question, Season. You lived in Sunnyvale. What year did you live there?
I moved there in 2015. Lived there 2015 through 2016.
All right. So you missed me. I was mayor back in 2001, 2002. So, but I hope I left the city in fairly good shape. So when you got there, it wasn't too bad.
I loved it. It was beautiful.
Okay. So shall we get started?
Let's do it. Yeah. Tell us more. Agile coaching nightmares, case studies, and Scrum. I'm eager to learn.
Okay. Well, my other meetup, I come up with cases, but Season, when you and I were talking about this, we just said, well, let's just find out what kinds of difficulties other people are running into. And then as a group, let's talk them through. So let's find out. Does anybody have a particular situation that they want to have us discuss?
So feel free to unmute, type in chat, or in chat, I have just put a link to the mural board. If you're more comfortable sharing there, feel free to do so. But Fred, do you want kind of a starter scenario, or would you like to wait until people have everything on the mural board and then vote on that?
Well, the whole idea was we would note down different problems, and then we'd vote to see which one we talk about, and then we talk about it as a team. But if you have a scenario you want to talk about, I suppose we could do that while everybody is busy typing.
Yep. So the one that I just wrote into the mural board is about reporting into a traditional PMO as an agile coach. So maybe we could start there as people are generating ideas. Okay,
well, let me just look at the chat. And which one is there's the mural one. Let me just check on that. While it's coming up, reporting into a PMO. Well, that's a good question. I guess something that we should talk about is, so what exactly is a PMO for? What is it? What's the purpose of it? If you have to report into it, well, why? Do you have any, and Season, since you're the one who's bringing this up, do you have that situation now?
I do. My title is a project manager, and I report into a senior program manager. And a lot of my responsibilities are tracking projects, tracking budget. So coming in with traditional responsibilities, but with an agile mindset and desire. Okay. Well, that sounds like an interesting challenge. Now, for some reason, I just lost the video from my meetings here. I don't know what's going on. Oh, here we are. Now I can see things. All right. Well, let's find out what other people say. Let's pick on Olaf. Olaf, have you ever had to report into a PMO, and what exactly does the PMO do for you?
No, I have not had to report into a PMO. Mostly because I was probably never in a company that really had that.
Okay. Well, Susan, what do you have to report to the PMO?
Well, I'm new to this role, so right now it's been a lot of budget things
Okay.
that have been taking up my time. So figuring out what our budget is, what we are spending money on, how to do purchase orders, what approvals we need from legal, kind of all of that stuff that has taken me away from coaching.
Okay. So, but your title is project manager, is that correct?
It is, yes.
All right, all right. So they're basically there to watch money. That's what the PMO is doing there. And is it very difficult to do that budget stuff?
Incredibly, yes.
Okay. And so let's see. Budget stuff, you probably have to report hours spent in contractor billing and things like that. Is that correct?
Indeed, yes.
Okay. Okay. And then you said purchases. So you have to buy like equipment or something, or pay for like AWS services or something like that. Is that correct?
Yep, it's tracking contractor hours, it's tracking full-time hours, it's tracking sick pay of full-time folks, it's hardware, it's software, it's training, it's travel and entertainment, all of that fun stuff. So tracking it and buying it.
Okay. Well, why are you having to do that? Because, you know, the sick time and all that stuff, that's probably an HR function. Are you an HR person?
Well, no, but nobody else is doing it, and it seems like a pretty project managery thing to do.
Okay, okay. Well, one thing to ask yourself if you're doing a lot of work is, am I the right person to do this? I have to tell you, I've been to several engagements. I come on scene and I ask, so what do you want me to do? And they say, well, we don't know, just do something. And then I basically have to figure out what I ought to do. And then once I do, then I become the owner of all that, because obviously I'm the right person to do it because I am doing it. But it seems to me that keeping track of all that detail, well, first of all, it probably isn't all that complicated. It's just detailed, a lot of detail. And one question is, what is being done with that information? You know, a lot of companies want to make sure everybody's busy. So they keep track of the hours. They're happy when people work long hours, when they work overtime. They're happy when there's a lot of bustle and activity and things going on. So, and when people understand that that's what the company wants, they make sure they're busy all the time. They make sure there are lots of meetings. There are lots of things that they're always doing, so that no one can say they're not busy. And the busier, the better. Now, the question is, do you want busy people or do you want valuable results? And most companies don't measure the value of the results. And so what they get is busy, but they don't necessarily get value. And it sounds like as a project manager, you're being asked to understand costs in great detail and report costs up to the PMO in great detail. But then I would say, well, so what? What's the value of understanding the cost unless you understand what the results are? And in my opinion, a PMO ought to be figuring out how to measure the value of what is produced. Because if they do that, then they can calculate a return on investment, an ROI. They can determine whether the costs that are being incurred are justified based on the value that's being produced. And so in my opinion, a PMO's job really ought to be to figure out how to put a price tag on the results of all this development activity, and then check that price tag against reality. So let me ask you, Susan, how would you calibrate the value of something that's produced?
Yeah, I think that's something that my team needs to come up with together. There are really no metrics for our success right now. So what does that look like? And we're not being tied to anything that's like our products need to generate certain amount of revenue. Like luckily that's not something that we're being held to. So it's more of, are we satisfying our customers is a metric that I think I might want to start measuring.
Okay. So if you're not being held to any results, that means you could do anything you want and not
Pretty
be wrong.
much.
So anyway, that's kind of silly. So I'm not able to see that that mural very well. So
Sure, what I'll do is I'll go ahead and I'll share what's on here. So again, if you're just joining, the link to the mural board is up here in chat. I'm going to go ahead and share what we have. If you'd like to add anything, please feel free, but maybe what we could do as a next step is take a vote on it. So far, some of our coaching nightmares, and hopefully I'm not bringing up too much trauma for people here, but the one that I just shared is about reporting into a traditional PMO. We've got a team that does not want to change. So working with a team that is, I assume is where all things are good. We don't want to change. It's working. We're fine. Working in a situation where you've gotten a mandate from leadership who says, we're going to be agile now. We're doing agile. A nightmare where you're with a highly technical team, but you're a non-technical coach. What do you do there? Or working with an incredibly large team that is more than 15 people. Working with hostility. So within the team, there's front end versus back end, and they're mashed together on the same team, and there's some anger and conflict there. Working with one team that has multiple product owners, how do you resolve priorities there? If the team does not want to use actual historical data for planning, but they want to use theories and formulas. Working with a team that lacks psychological safety, and working with managers who like to micromanage work. So some coaching nightmares that we have faced. What I'd like to do is just call for a vote here. And unfortunately, Zoom is right in my way of getting a vote. So let me grab the voting, here we go, session. And let's do our 3 votes. So you can do 3 votes on one nightmare that really resonates with you. You could do 2 on one nightmare, 1 on another nightmare. You could do 1 on 3 different nightmares. But either way, we are going to do 3 votes. So I'm just setting up the voting now. And you can do with your votes as you would like. At the end of the voting session, the nightmares with the most votes, Fred is going to take us through some coaching and the Scrum framework for that. So I will go ahead and stop sharing. Go ahead and get your 3 votes into the mural. If you're not able to get on the mural, you can always chat me or unmute and just say what you'd like us to focus on. And I will stop talking so we can vote. And just in case you've never used Mural before, you'll just click on a sticky note to vote. If you need to remove your vote, just shift click and that will take it off.
By the way, I'm not going to be voting. I'm going to let other people have the pleasure of voting.
Looks like we are wrapping up our votes. So we'll take around 10 more seconds if you'd like to get your votes in. And then I will go ahead and end the votes and share my screen once again. All right, so we have a tie. We have a blank card, so that one's fun. I guess that's a choose your own adventure, but otherwise, what do you do if you are working with a team that does not want to change? And then what do you do if you work with a team that has hostility within the team, especially among different roles? So maybe you're a coach, you're coming onto a team and the team says, things are great. We don't want to change what's a Scrum stuff. We're fine just how we are. Fred, what do you do?
Okay, so a team doesn't want to change. Well, first of all, who's on the team? Are they, well, let me change the question. The Scrum Framework is oriented around having a team of people with 3 different sets of responsibilities. There's somebody whose job is to figure out what in the world they should create. And that person is generally known as the product owner, someone who guides the team to do the stuff that's the most valuable to do. The next set of people are developers, people who have technical skills, and they should have all the technical skills that are necessary in order to create the product. Okay, and then the third set of skills is this person called the Scrum Master, and her job really is to make the other 2 sets of people live up to their responsibilities. Scrum Master needs to teach and coach the product owner to focus on figuring out what's valuable for the team to do. And the Scrum Master needs to teach and coach the developers to figure out how to create what the product owner identifies as valuable. Okay, now, for the product owner to be able to do their job, they need to have some business sense. They're the one who figures out what's valuable, so they need to be in touch with the marketplace. They need to understand what needs need to be filled. And it's not necessarily a technical role. It's more a role of understanding the kind of customer you want to serve and what makes them tick. Now, the developers need to be people who are technical because they use technology to fill the needs that the product owner identifies. And they need to be able to do so, which means they need all the skills that are necessary. If the need is to create a website, well, somebody needs to do the HTML, somebody needs to do the JavaScript, somebody needs to do the database stuff, somebody needs to do the Java backend. So there are different technological skills that are required, and the team has to have all of them. And then finally, the team has to figure out for itself how they're going to do this. How are they going to operate in such a way that they actually get it all done? And they must not have some manager tell them what to do. They have to figure out for themselves. So whoever posted that, let me ask, what kind of team is it? Are they people who have all the skills that are necessary to create the product from beginning to end? Or are they like a functional team? They can do the QA part, but they can't do anything else.
This one was a write-in that we got before this session. So let's say that it's a functional team and they have all of the skills to make the product, but they just they're not into this Scrum stuff. They were doing just fine without a board, without a product owner, the Scrum Master stuff. Like, why do they don't need that.
Okay, all right. So you're going to basically be the proxy for the person who posted this
I
message?
will, and hopefully I
Okay.
represent them well.
Okay. Well, the question is, why does anybody go to work? They want to make money, make a living, and they want to keep their job. So the question is, they may think they're doing great, but what does the company think? Are they contributing value? And are they contributing value in excess of what it's costing to pay them to be there? Now, it's a very rare company that measures value in that way, which is really unfortunate, but it's ultimately true. If you want job security, you better be doing something that's worthwhile. And just because you're working on a set of tasks that somebody gave you to do doesn't necessarily mean it's worthwhile. So the best way that I've found to motivate a team that are complacent is to start talking about the value that's created. And in order to do that, you need to have a product owner who understands the idea of value and how to measure it. And then everything on the product backlog, every task that the team does, has to have a value attached to it. So you can then start measuring the output of the team in terms of value. And that's a very good yardstick to determine whether the team is being effective or not. Now, a lot of people believe that you can do the same thing with story points. You can figure out the team's velocity, and if the velocity is getting better, that's good. But there's a problem with that. And Susan, what's the problem with that?
Well, it's definitely something that could be manipulated, first of all. You just make a story and it's 100 points, and there you go. That's a high velocity. But also, story points don't correlate to value or customer satisfaction. They really don't mean anything in the long run.
Yeah, they're not absolute measures, they're relative measures. And basically the story points for a story, whatever the team decides to make them. So it's not really possible to use them to measure the team's productivity. They're only useful for a team to figure out just how big of a challenge they should take on in a given sprint. So, but value is something different, because value is something that can be measured objectively. And so let me ask you, how would you measure the value of something objectively?
I think there are a number of ways you could, and as always, feel free to unmute or put in chat. But I think it depends on how you define success for your product. Is it the money that you make? Is it the time that you save your customers? Is it the happiness score of your team? Those would be some examples. What else is for value? Any other ideas?
Well, let me lead you through the thought process. Okay, say you are the president of a startup company, and you're scrounging capital to pay your developers to create the latest, greatest, best app in the world. Are you going to measure success by how happy your developers are? No. How would you measure success?
Probably by how much money I'm making.
How much money you're making. You're investing money. If you're paying developers to create something, you're investing money in them to create something of value. So how do you measure the value that's created? Well, you better figure out how to measure the value, and you better figure out how to measure it in terms of dollars and cents, because you're investing dollars and cents to create it. So how do you measure the value of something that's created like that?
in revenue is one example. And then Olaf had a good point too. If you're doing something like making maybe a car, you would measure it in like safety or defects or something along that. So less around the money and more about the experience of the product. So thank you, Olaf, for sharing that one.
Well, but let me ask you that. If you're out to produce something that doesn't have any defects, how valuable is it?
Well, if it's an insulin pump, that is probably quite valuable.
Well, how do you measure how valuable that is?
I'm not sure.
You're not sure?
No.
Oh, I know exactly how to measure how valuable that is.
Do tell, I'm curious.
You sell it. There are 4 ways to increase value. You can make something for sale, add revenue, which you pointed out. And you can measure that value in dollars and cents because the value of something you sell is what somebody will pay for it. Okay. Now, Olaf said, well, you want to have a defect-free insulin pump. I would agree with that. I think that an insulin pump that didn't pump insulin probably would not be worth very much, probably would be very costly in the end because the company would be open to all kinds of lawsuits from all the people who died because they didn't get the insulin they need. But ultimately, it's valuable because you can sell it. Now, there's another way something can be valuable. It can be valuable because it reduces the costs of something. If you make an insulin pump and it costs $50 per pump, and then you can do some improvement to it that would reduce the cost to $40 per pump, then if you sell 10,000 pumps, that's worth $100,000. So increase revenue, decrease costs. Now, the other 2 ways are a little bit more esoteric. You can decrease risks. And again, with the insulin pump, if there's a risk that 1 in 1,000 people will end up with a complication that kills them, and that costs lots of money in lawsuits. If you can reduce that risk to 1 in 10,000, and you know how much a lawsuit costs, then you can calculate the monetary value of reducing that risk and use that to justify creating a product or creating the improvement. The final way to do it is to increase opportunity. If you're in a competitive bidding situation and you win 1 contract out of 10 that you apply for, and you do some kind of improvement, so now you win 1 out of 5 contracts, well, you've just increased your success and therefore the revenue that you can get by at least 10%. You've gone from 10% to 20% chance. And so you can monetize that. You can figure out how much that costs and use that to justify spending a certain amount of money to make that possible. So anyway, you measure the value. Now, how do you motivate a team? Well, you measure the value that they produce. And if we assume that they are able to make the product with no help from outside, then it's very simple. You figure out how much the stuff they make is worth on the market. And then you can share that with them. Oh, by the way, it's costing us $100,000 a month to pay you guys, but you're only making about $80,000 a month in value. So why should we do that? Why should we pay you $100,000 to make $80,000 in value? That's not a good deal for us. We may need to rethink whether we're going to let you work on this or not. On the other hand, we're paying you $100,000 and you're making us $500,000 a month in value. Boy, that's a great deal. Let's do more. And really sophisticated companies will say, boy, you're costing $100,000. We're making $500,000. We're going to give $100,000 of that profit to you as a reward for the value you're creating. So, a team that doesn't really want to change doesn't have any reason to change, because they don't really feel like what they're doing makes any difference or impacts anything. And the way to change that is to focus them on the idea that, okay, we have to create value, and it's possible to measure the value that's created. And then you can do various incentives with excess value, like, for instance, sharing some of that with the team. By the way, another trick would be to put up a scoreboard, different teams saying, okay, these guys made this much, those guys made that much, and all of a sudden there's a competition. See who can make the most value. So does that make?
Yeah, I'm hearing that it's about increasing the transparency of the value of the team. And it could be something positive where they see that they're delivering tremendous value, and that makes them want to deliver more. Or they're seeing that there's an opportunity, maybe by using something like Scrum, to deliver more value to the company. And just kind of incentivizing that motivation in ways that work for the team.
Yeah. Now, probably the biggest hurdle towards implementing Scrum isn't, doing the 15-minute stand-up every day, or doing the other events, or using the different artifacts. Probably the biggest hurdle is this idea of responsibility. Usually developers on a team that are comfortable with what they've been doing are pretty much just letting other people tell them what to do. And they say, okay, yeah, tell us what to do and we'll do our best. Which means they don't really own any results other than to do what they were told to do. And by the way, if what they were told to do is something they can't do, well, that's not their fault. It's the fault of the person who told them to do it, because they told us to do something that couldn't be done. So it's their fault, not our fault. And if somebody told them something to do that wasn't really worthwhile, well, that's not our fault. We just did what we were told. So there's a lot of safety in the world of developers in a situation where they just do what they're told, because it's hard to make a mistake that you have to blame on yourself. Now, what Scrum does is it says, okay, the developers have to, as a whole, make all their own decisions. And why? It's so they can't point the finger of blame at anybody but themselves. If you make all your own decisions, then basically you own the results of those decisions. And you own the credit for doing a great job, and you own the debit for doing a shitty job. So that kind of is an area that's not as safe as developers are used to living in. But on the same time, it's not as restrictive either. And usually when developers start making their own decisions, at first they're apprehensive and cautious, but then they see how much better things work, because they don't have to deal with all the stupid, crazy things that people tell them to do. They can just do it right the first time. And especially if there's a way to measure the results, and they can see the hockey stick graph of how much better things get so quick, then they get sold on it. They wouldn't want to do it any other way.
So really leaning into that motivation of being a self-managing team and shared ownership of the work.
Yeah. Shared ownership, as I say, is dangerous at first. People look at it apprehensively because they're not sure they can live up to it. But as soon as they realize they can, and they can produce a lot of value, they become very avid proponents of that whole idea. One thing when I'm dealing with new agile situations, and the developers, like managers, don't want to hear any lip from the developers. I say, well, wait a second. You want the developers to tell you no every once in a while. And the manager says, huh? What? I don't want them to tell me no. I want them to do what they're told. And it says, well, great. You know what? If they can't say no, that when they say yes, the word yes has no meaning. So if you want the developers to say yes and mean it, then they have to be able to say no. So, okay, is there anything else to talk about that particular Stick'em Post-it note thing? What do you think, Susan?
Feel free in chat or unmute if you had any other questions or thoughts on working with teams that are resistant to change. Otherwise, we can move on to our next one, and that is about hostility in a team. So if you have a team that pits the front-end developers against the back-end developers, put them on the same team and there's anger. Your thoughts, Fred? How does the Scrum Framework handle that?
Okay. Well, let me ask you this. Are they co-located?
If this was your question, feel free to unmute or put in chat.
Hi, this is Deanna. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay. This was a handful of years ago, but it was something that still bothers me. This is a group that would not co-locate because one group had better seats on a different floor than the other team. And that just kind of, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like it wasn't a team.
No, not at all.
Okay. Did they ever look each other in the eye?
Yeah. They went to a stand-up on occasion and dutifully reported their status out and then went back to their cliques. Yes.
Okay. Well, if they dutifully reported their status in the stand-up, that isn't what the stand-up is for.
Right. Right.
How was work assigned in that context?
I think that's interesting. I think that in Jira, I think that maybe the tech lead doled it out to either front or back end.
Oh, okay. So basically the front end people got their orders to do stuff and the back end people got their orders to do stuff. And then when it didn't work, they both pointed fingers at each other.
Right. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And they probably pointed fingers at the tech lead too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes. And their manager was the tech lead.
Okay.
Yes. It's kind of an impossible situation. It's almost like one of those crossword puzzles that, are impossible to solve. So I still think about it.
Okay. Well, let's look at the situation. So if somebody had something to do or they had a task in front of them, who is the person who decided that they're the ones who had to do that?
I think that the person on the team decided that was their task. And they would assign I think they would assign it to themselves. I think that the person, like the tech lead, would be there, but I think that the person assigned it to themselves in sprint planning.
Okay, so in Jira, there were a whole bunch of tasks and then people just pick the next task to work on, something like that.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, but they didn't have any say as to what the tasks were. It was just the tech lead doled out all these tasks.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, and then there were dependencies. The back end people couldn't proceed until the front end people had gotten their stuff done. Is that kind of what's going on?
They were supposed to be on the same team, where they worked together to make pieces that were front end and back end together.
Okay, but didn't sound like they were working together. Is that a true statement?
That was the problem. Yep.
Okay, all right. Did they ever have any of the other Scrum events besides the daily Scrum?
They did. They had all of their daily, or not the daily, but the Scrum events. And
so did they have a planning meeting where they looked
Yes.
at the backlog and then they picked the items that they were going to tackle?
Yes.
Did they come together as a team to do that?
They were in the same room together.
Okay.
Yeah, they're in the same room. Mm-hmm.
Well, but who picked the items? Because you have the tech lead and the developers themselves. I mean,
Yeah,
who looked at
it's
the product backlog and picked the items?
I think that the team looked at it together and decided what was front end and what was back end, and then worked it
Okay.
out amongst their factions.
Okay.
This also kind of ties a little bit to the other sticky that I saw, which was when they say this is working exactly the way we want it, what problem are you looking to solve?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, you know, the Scrum Framework is based on what's called empirical process control, which means you make decisions based on things you measure. And every Scrum event is an opportunity to look at something that gives transparency. In other words, something you can measure, and then make decisions as a result.
Mm-hmm.
The planning meeting, you look at the product backlog, all the needs that need to be filled. And then as a team, the developers, with the agreement of the product owner, pick those items that they will implement by the end of the sprint. And they need to do the picking because otherwise they can blame somebody else for picking the wrong thing and not being able to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like that mechanism wasn't working very well because if people were hostile to each other, it doesn't really sound like they were doing what they together chose to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now the daily Scrum is supposed to be where the team gets together and says, okay, so how are we doing? Are we on track to delivering those things we said we would deliver?
Mm-hmm.
And the purpose of the daily Scrum is for somebody to say, hey, you know, I'm stuck, I need some help. So somebody else will say, okay, hey, I can help you. I have some bandwidth I can help you with.
Mm-hmm.
And it needs to be quick. The Scrum basically is there just to surface these issues rather than to solve them.
Yes.
So that you can identify what the problems are, get them addressed, so you can stay on track to deliver what you said you were going to deliver at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the third event is the review, the sprint review, and that's to give everybody a look at the new functionality that's been created in the context of whatever the product is. So if the product has some new features, well, you look at the product with the new features.
Mm-hmm.
And the purpose of that is not to provide some quality check to make sure everything was done right. The purpose of that is to say, okay, this is what the product does now after we've done all this work. What kind of ideas does that generate in terms of what the next things it can do could be? And the sprint review is there to give the product owner feedback and inspiration now that they can see the product as it is rather than how they imagined it before the sprint. They can see how it is, and that usually produces ideas about new product backlog items. And by the way, did they do a sprint review?
We did have, we had to sit down with the product owner. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. And then finally, there's the retrospective. When the retrospective happens at the end of the sprint, and the idea is that the developers and the product owner and the Scrum Master get into a room, they shut the door, and then they are open and honest with each other about how things went. And most of the time, people these days don't do the sprint review properly. There's a bunch of garbage on the internet about it. I'm sorry, I'm not very polite.
Oh, tell me more about that. I'd like to know more about what you're saying.
Okay, well, you know, there's this whole idea, well, the sprint review, it's all about figuring out, or this retrospective is about, okay, so what should we keep doing? What should we stop doing? What should we start doing we haven't been doing? And there are these websites where you can, in effect, put up these cards and then vote on them. And it's all a very mechanical thing. but that completely misses the point. The team needs to think and act like a team. They need to get over personality conflicts and focus on working together to create value. And this retrospective needs to be a closed door meeting where everybody can be open and honest and talk about all the pink elephants in the living room that everybody knows are there, but nobody wants to bring up. And that's an event where the Scrum Master really earns her pay, because every Scrum event is an opportunity to inspect transparency and adapt. With the sprint review, you inspect transparency in the sprint increment. In the sprint planning meeting, you inspect the transparency of the product backlog and adapt the sprint backlog. In the retrospective, you have to inspect transparency of the team and have the team adapt itself. And the real trick is to get the team to be transparent. You need to be able to talk about things that are important, even if they're not that comfortable to talk about. And so one of the rules that everybody violates, but is really crucial, is that the retrospective has to be like Vegas. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. What's talked about in the retrospective stays in the retrospective. There's no record of anything that's discussed. Nothing is published about it unless the entire team chooses to do so. But the point is, you can kind of say, okay, we're just here, it's just us, there's nobody else. You can speak freely. And that's where,
if I can jump in, I'd like to say that I think that that's a compelling point that I think a lot of Scrum Masters today miss, because everyone wants to make, inspect, and adapt very public, and everyone can learn from those choices. And to a big extent, that's true. But it also kind of tampers down people's ability to feel like they can speak openly, and it won't end up on a Confluence page somewhere that, you know, that Tina said that Ray's a jerk. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, it's like you need to have the team's permission on stuff, and you also need to set boundaries that, you know, we'll publish what is our team's next steps that, you know, that we want to publish, but everything else that we work out is just us.
Yeah. And you know what? Next steps, they're really not anybody else's business. By the way, you know, this sprint backlog, the task list and the burn down chart and all that stuff, that's nobody else's business but the developers.
I agree.
The reason is that there's a product backlog which shows what all the different things are that are going to be made. And there is a sprint that identifies certain product backlog items that are going to be delivered. That's all anybody outside the team needs to know. They don't need to, you know, track the story points that are being delivered developer by developer on a daily basis. And I really object to tools like Jira, which seem to be designed to make that possible as one of their selling points.
Yep.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. So, and part of the Scrum Master's job is to protect the team from crap like that, which is challenging sometimes. Yeah. So anyway, I think that if there was a real retrospective with a skillful Scrum Master that could get people to talk openly about what's really bothering them, that would eliminate the hostility. By the way, let me just pose a question to you. Let's just say that the team as a whole is pretty good, but there's one prima donna asshole that's ruining everything. What should be done about that, and who should do it?
That's a great question.
First of all, whose responsibility is it to deal with that? And the Scrum Framework has a clear answer to that question?
I would say it's the team.
The team, right. The team needs to be able to select its own membership. And if it doesn't, then they have a built-in excuse for failure. So for instance, if the product owner says, hey, you know what, we need a JavaScript guy, and my brother-in-law is this really good JavaScript guy, I'm going to hire him and put him on the team. What's going to happen? Well, the team will point to this stupid brother-in-law who they got saddled with without their having any say-so in it. And he's going to be the source of all of the difficulties the team has. So the team has to be able to select its own members so that they have nobody to point a finger of blame at if the team has the wrong people on it. So actually, there's a case, I don't believe it's in my first book, but I'm going to be writing book number 2, and one of the cases in it is going to be exactly this situation where you have somebody who's bossy and arrogant and making life difficult for everybody else. And basically the team has to figure out how to deal with that themselves. And the Scrum Master's role would be to help coach them how to deal with that. Just out of curiosity, do you have any ideas about how you would coach a team to deal with an asshole in the group?
Is that a question open to everyone? I think it would be, I would like to hear what other impressions are from the other
Okay.
attendees on that, because
Very good.
it's it's pretty common.
Yeah, it is. See if anybody's as brave as you are.
Yep, feel free to unmute or put your ideas in chat. The way I've dealt with it is it depends. It depends on my relationship with that person. Can I talk to them directly?
Okay.
If I have a good relationship with their manager, can I talk to that manager directly? That's probably one of those 2 options would be my first line of defense. Any other
Okay.
ideas?
Well, let me ask you, Susan, why would you talk to these people? Is it your responsibility to do this?
It's everyone's responsibility, but I'm
I
comfortable.
disagree. It's not everybody's responsibility. Did I intimidate you? Did I intimidate you?
No, I just have nothing to add to that disagreement.
Okay. Well, first of all, let's say you were the one who tried to solve this problem, and you did it by talking to the person, talking to the person's manager. What would be the result of that? Let's say that you were able to solve the problem that way.
Yeah, that has been a real situation where I have talked to someone on the team and given them feedback, and they changed their behavior, and things were a lot smoother between that person and the team and the way that we worked.
Okay, all right.
I think there's maybe an element of the drama triangle in that.
What
Well,
is
let me
this
put it this
drama
way.
triangle?
Yeah, I don't know what that is.
It's where you have a victim and an accuser and a rescuer.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so the asshole is is one of those, and the victim is the team, and the rescuer is maybe the Scrum Master. And so by taking on the role of rescuer, we might be teaching everybody that it's okay for them not to take the responsibility for solving the problem.
That's right. If the Scrum Master solves a problem, that means any problem like that in the future is the Scrum Master's responsibility to solve and nobody else's. Also, you know what, if I was arrogant which I have to admit I am. And it was rubbing people the wrong way. And somebody like a Scrum Master took me aside and said, by the way, Fred, you know, you're kind of bothering everybody else. I don't know if you realize it, but you're really arrogant and you're making everybody uncomfortable. How do you think I would feel as part of that group after that?
Well, I think the Scrum Master didn't have the right approach to that.
Okay.
So if I were talked to in that way, I would feel ostracized.
Mm-hmm. I'd be very suspicious. You know, all these smiling people that I'm working with, they're not telling me the truth about how they feel. And so I don't know if I can trust anything that they say about all that stuff. And that can be a problem that keeps the team from working together like a team. I mean, basically the teams work together because they trust each other. And the sprint retrospective is a team building exercise. It's where people can be open and honest and therefore feel like they can trust each other. They can say things that are uncomfortable, but in a safe way. And if they can say uncomfortable things in a safe way, well, that's kind of how a family works. And so they can maybe, you know, yell at each other, hammer and tongs, but then afterwards, you know, when somebody outside the team tries to criticize them, then all of a sudden they rise in everybody's defense because it's us. And you know, and handling a situation like this is very tricky because, in effect, you have to figure out how to keep it being us and not just everybody, but they're too afraid to tell the truth about something, and so somebody else has to tell the truth to somebody, which makes that somebody feel like nobody's telling them the truth.
What kind of exercises are good to help a team get to that level when they're just kind of getting comfortable with each other in the beginning?
Okay, well, what works for me, you know, if a team is new together and they really haven't done this kind of talking before, well, you talk about safe things, happy things. You know, how did that go? How did the sprint go? It worked pretty well. By the way, who really did a good job? You know, who really came through and helped everybody? And you can say, okay, yeah, Susie, she stayed late that night to get us caught up, and that really saved us. And so, you know, I want to give a shout out to Susie because she helped us a lot. And then you can have, you know, some games like picking out, you know, who the star of the sprint was or things like that. But and by the way, a Scrum Master should keep an eye on everybody so that they can come up with some kind of example for anybody on the team for what they did above and beyond. And then a Scrum Master can either suggest that or could pull that out, like, you know, hey, Bob, you know, didn't like Joe really help you out? And then encourage Bob to say, yeah, Joe really, he did. You know, I was stuck, couldn't figure out that algorithm, but, you know, Joe was very patient and he came over and explained it to me and got me unstuck, and I'm really grateful for that. So talk about good things and get people used to talking about good things. So the retrospective is a place where good things happen. Okay. And then maybe after a few, when people are more comfortable, you start asking a little edgier questions, like, how do you feel being on this team? Are you proud of being on this team? You know, just asking some questions that are not quite so feel-good questions, but are getting to more honest subjects. And then after a while, you look for the little breakthrough. And what that is, it's something like, oftentimes where you ask those questions and then somebody on the team, and usually it's somebody who is not very senior, might say, well, you know what, I don't know if I belong on this team because all of you guys are really great and you're much better than I am, and I don't know if I really belong here. And when somebody says something that dangerous but that honest, then the Scrum Master has to step in and make sure that there is a good outcome. And the Scrum Master say, what are you talking about? Of course you're needed. Of course you do good things. You know, you're not as skilled with HTML as that person over there, but you know what? You never ever give up. And you always, when you say you're going to do something, no matter how hard it is, you always make sure it gets done. And so when everybody sees that somebody can be honest in a dangerous way and good things happen, then all of a sudden the dam breaks and everybody starts talking about everything that's been bottled up forever. And all those elephants in the living room pop out, and then you can talk about them. And usually that's when the time box of the retro starts getting bumped up against that, because there's so much to talk about that people just want to keep talking. And then people look forward to the retrospective. And then after a while, the retros start getting short again. And the reason is that people trust each other enough that they can talk about that stuff without the safety net of the retrospective and the closed door. And when they can get along that well, then there really isn't anything they can't tackle. And that's when productivity goes through the roof and all kinds of good things from the Scrum Framework happen. And at that point, the Scrum Master's challenge is what to do about team turnover, because people get new jobs, new people come on board. How do you get a new person folded into an existing tight group? That's a whole different challenge, but again, it's just a matter of building trust and getting everybody to be honest with each other. So I guess I got it.
Awesome.
I got on my soapbox there. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Deanna,
And it does. And that's honestly, that's the juice for being a Scrum Master, is knowing how to navigate the really hard parts.
Exactly. Scrum Masters are not technical people. Scrum Masters are people. And their job is to understand whose responsibilities things are and really hold people accountable for living up to their responsibilities and getting people to work together as a team. I like to say that you've got a good product owner when the team is producing lots of valuable stuff. You've got a good development team when there are lots and lots of product backlog items that they churn through and turn over quickly. And you've got a really good Scrum Master when everybody on the team is working together as a team. If there's no teamwork, you need a new Scrum Master. If the developers can't seem to get anything finished, well, maybe you got developer problems. If the developers work and create lots and lots of product backlog items, but not much value is produced, you got a product owner problem. But in the end, all three need to do their job. And when they do, all the magic of Scrum happens.
Deanna, did you get some clarity on hostility for the team and some ideas to work with?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd get them all in the same room, on a different floor than either one of them are on. So it's neutral territory. And close the door, basically laid out the rules, the Vegas rules, and then, talk about happy things and get people used to working together or talking together. And then all of a sudden, when you have the breakthrough, then all the problems are solved.
Well, I
Okay.
think we have time for one more, and this one I'm being selfish because it's interesting to me, and it's the one about the team that doesn't want to use historical data for planning, but they want to use theoretical formulas. So we kind of
Ah,
talked about value, we talked about metrics, but what do you do when you can't plan because your team is lost in theory land and not in reality?
okay. Well, as far as I'm concerned, they could come up with whatever theories they want to. But in the Scrum framework, you start out each sprint by choosing a list of product backlog items to work on. And at the end of each sprint, you need to show that you did them. And if they want to do that by measuring their velocity and comparing their velocity against the story points of the product backlog items, that's fine. If they want to do it with a Ouija board and a crystal ball, that's fine. Ultimately, the measure is what did they get done and how valuable was it? And so I would just say that if they want to do all these theories and formulas and all that stuff, that's fine. But you got to measure what actually gets done. You see, Scrum is all about what's called empirical process control, which means you make decisions based on measurements and not predictions or guesses. And that's where Scrum really separates from the world of waterfall, because if you think about a waterfall plan with all of its critical paths and stuff like that, it's all based on guesswork. And even according to PMI, the people who invented the SDLC, those guesses are most likely wrong. So don't guess, measure. That's, by the way, why Scrum Framework divides work into sprints, specific periods of time. And why? Well, so that you have something to measure. At the end of each sprint, you should have some results which can be measured and then can be used to guide future decisions. So for that team, I would just simply say, yeah, do whatever you want, but what's going to get done in 2 weeks? You tell me, and we'll see if you're right or not. Does
If
that
this
kind
was
of answer the question?
your card and you wanted to add anything, or if you had any questions, let us know.
So that was my card. And there's overwhelming evidence that they cannot deliver what they say,
Okay.
sprint after sprint after sprint.
All right.
And yet they want to stick to theoretical formulas in the face of real world evidence and measurements.
Okay. So it sounds like they're getting away with it.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah. Okay. So, well, why are they getting away with it? Who would care about whether they're delivering what they say they're going to deliver or not?
That's a good point. Yeah. Well, there are other dynamics in this scenario, I guess, that would shed light on that, but that I wouldn't want to bring.
All right. Well, in the real world, or excuse me, in the Scrum framework, let's not talk about real world stuff, but in the Scrum framework, the product owner is an investor. They're identifying things for the teams to do, and the teams then select what they're going to do, but each thing has a value, and the product owner is deciding whether the work of the team is worth the money that's being spent on it. I dare say that these folks with their formulas and stuff like that, nobody's measuring the value that they're producing. And if somebody was, I dare say that the people are not producing much value. And so there's a very simple equation, how much value versus how much cost. And if you're fiddle farting around for a long time and doing lots and lots of work, but not producing much results, well, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that that might not be worthwhile for somebody who's having to pay for it all. So
It's a fairly complex thing that I can't go into, but there are many factors outside of that that make it so that people probably don't care all that much how much gets produced actually, because outside factors are pulling people off of the team and delaying the overall system of delivery. So even if the team gets delivered or delivers their stuff, there are other parts of a process that will delay whether it can actually get out into the market and get paid for.
Okay, it sounds like that the team isn't able to create the product all by itself.
Yes.
All right, so well then they have they have no reason to own whether the product gets created or not, because they can't do it.
Right.
And so I take it there are a lot of dependencies going on. We can't do our work because they didn't do their work, and we have no control over them, so you can't blame us. Something like
It's
that.
not necessarily like that. The team can do all their work. What can't happen is the things that happen after the team is done with their work, like the batching up of stuff, and then it has to go through another process, and there's bottlenecks on that process, and
Okay.
delays and other things that prevent that step from happening.
Okay. Well, but if there's steps beyond what the team can do, that means that they can't create the product all by themselves. Remember, the definition of done says this is what a product backlog item has to be checked off as, so that it can be given to a customer with no further work required.
Yep.
It sounds like if they're back-end things that are bottlenecks, then further work is required.
Right.
And so, yeah, usually one kind of problem, which is what you identified, is always mixed in with other problems that contribute to its intractability.
Right.
Okay. Okay, so anything else?
That's a good one.
Yeah. Now, Susan, I'd like to get a little bit of feedback from you, because you and I talked about this session as an interesting experiment to try. I'm curious, your gut reaction to this. Was this session kind of what you were thinking it was going to be?
I think so. I was thinking just people would bring some of their challenges and we'd walk them through the Scrum framework. And we had some really interesting ones, starting with the PMO, going to conflict on the team and how Scrum handles that. And then definitely uncovered some interesting truths with this last conversation. So I thought it was good. Fred, do you think we missed anything, or I want to throw it to the group? Did you have any other questions or thoughts?
Well, I'll just say that the PMO question was an interesting one, because I'm not sure I understand what value a PMO would add. I don't believe that there's any real role for a PMO, even without the Scrum framework involved, because what does the PMO do? Well, it kind of assembles statistics about costs and stuff like that, but so what?
I see that Michael is cheeseburgering at us, so I don't know if that means that Michael agrees, or but yeah, it's an interesting question. I think we could have a whole nother meetup just on that, but yeah, we'll just throw it out into the universe as it is.
Yeah. Well, what I like to do is I say, okay, the PMO is a solution. What's the problem? What's the problem it's trying to solve? And oftentimes, all these structures and meetings and things, they're trying to solve the problem of transparency. People are trying to say, what the hell is going on? Let's have a meeting to find out what's going on. And let's have a meeting to find out why the meetings are not finding out what's going on. And so one of the beauties of the Scrum framework, it boils transparency down to really just two artifacts, one for internal use by the developers and the other one for external use. And pretty much that's all you need.
Mhm. I agree. I'm with you.
Yeah. Okay.
And Vicky says lots to think about. Oh no, so many of my agile nightmares captured in one place. I should have had like a trigger warning for this session. That was my mistake, but we're getting through them together.
Okay. All right.
Any other thoughts, questions, feedback?
I always feel enlightened after I've been in the presence of Fred, I will say. There's a clarity, I think, that you have around explaining the Scrum framework that few other people have.
Well, thank you very much. I've had the opportunity to write several books about it and discuss in great detail a whole bunch of situations. So unfortunately for me, I find the Scrum framework to be very, very simple. And so I forget that it can be very, very complicated for other people. And I'm going to have a bit of a challenge because I'm speaking at a conference on November 6th. It's an online conference, the Agility University something or other. And they're focused on things like psychology and brain physiology to explain Agile. And I'm saying to myself, well, I don't know any of that. All I know is that it's about accountability and responsibility and measuring results. So I'm going to give my presentation and then see if anybody sneers at it because I'm not talking about neurons in the brain or things like that.
Is it the Enterprise Agility University Conference, World
Yes, it is.
Conference?
Yes,
Perfect.
it is.
I put a link to that in chat, and I also put a link to your website, Fred, and that's where people can go to learn more about you, your meetup, and to buy your books, the Introduction to the Scrum Framework and the Advanced Scrum Case Studies. Fred, do I also have your permission to put your LinkedIn profile in chat so people can keep up with you there?
Please
Excellent.
do. Yeah.
So I've got that in there, and you talk about your upcoming classes as well on your LinkedIn.
That's correct. By the way, through the miracle of modern technology, anybody who buys a book from me, from my website, will get an autographed copy. If it's a PDF, that's not a problem. And I'm publishing the introduction to the Scrum Framework in PDF form, but I just include an autograph page in that. And then the Advanced Scrum Case Studies, that's actually printed. It's a paperback, but the company I use to print it does print on demand. And so I include.
Fred, we just lost you. I think you might have muted your phone in the excitement. But I know that I saw on your LinkedIn profile that you had some wizard magic that would allow you to autograph your books. So that I think is a really cool thing. Maybe while you're doing that and unmuting your phone, I'm also going to put a link up in chat to the Bay Area Agile Coaching Circles meetup. And our next event is in December. It is December 1st. And what we do each year is we have a retrospective on the year. So that is looking back on 2021 and giving you your space as a coach while you usually are giving that space to others. This is your time to look back on your year in coaching. If you want to come and just sit and listen, if you want to participate, if you want to talk, how did your year go? What could have gone better? What went well? What did you learn? This is your personal retrospective on your year in coaching. So if you're interested in that, join us on December 1st. If you're interested in speaking or organizing, we are always looking for more. And then Fred, did we get the phone back up? Or I think no, not yet. But if there is anything that you want to add, Fred, you can always send it to me and I'll send it out to the group. But otherwise, I'll go ahead and I will stop our recording.